Hi, I'm Jenny Howell from Garden Gate Magazine, and there's a chill in the air and the holidays are coming. And wouldn't it be nice to have a homemade wreath right on your front door? Well, I'm going to show you today how to make one by yourself with evergreen and dried materials that you might be able to find in your own garden. So let's get started. So while this is not the optimal time to prune your evergreens, you can still take a few little branches here and there and nobody's going to know. It's not going to hurt the tree. It doesn't take a ton of greens to make a wreath. So what you want to do is go in and look at your tree and say, okay, I could probably take this branch out because you're really not going to notice that that's gone. So I need to find the end of it. I'm going to go all the way into the next branch, and I'm going to snip out that little piece of blue spruce, and you're not even going to know that it's gone. You might look for pieces of branches that are turning back into the tree, things that don't look good. Go down low. Maybe you want to mow a little better around that area, so you might take off some lower branches that are always in your way when you're mowing. And you can get down low and pick up some of those prettier branches, but that's probably enough out of one. If you use some mixed greens, then it doesn't take very many snippings off of each plant, and so you can kind of spread the love of the pruning all around. So this is the boxwood that's been covering up my path for a good couple of years, and I keep ignoring it and forgetting to prune it. So I think maybe this year I'll use it for my holiday evergreens, and I'm going to go in and snip it off a little bit. Then in the spring I can come back and actually give it a proper pruning. But I can just go right in here, take off a little piece right there, and use all of that for holiday greens and decorating. Okay, so you don't have to use just tree evergreens. You can get a wealth of bits and pieces to use off of just a little shrub. So I've got a juniper here that's a little out of control. So I can just go on in here and take a snip out of there. And I might go a little further down, maybe get some of these pieces that are low. Set that down in here. Snip out a couple pieces. Okay, so it doesn't have to be just evergreen that you use in your wreath. Wander around your garden and you can find all kinds of cool stuff to put in a holiday wreath for decorating or part of the bulk. So like here, we've got some sedum. It's not quite dried yet, but it will dry. So I'm going to cut some of those flower heads off, just way down low, like I would as if I was just going to get rid of it in the spring. And take a few pieces of that out. And we'll put those in my wagon for later. Oh, look, we've got some clematis over here. This is kind of fun. This is Helios Aztec, and it's a summer blooming clematis. But the seed heads stayed put together really well, so they're kind of fun and a little bit fluffy. And we can glue those into a wreath and make it kind of neat. So got those. Oh, I've got Oriental Limelight Artemisia over here. And I must say Oriental Limelight can be a little bit invasive, but it actually makes a really nice dried flower. So if you can come in and take a big chunk off of that. If you can hang it upside down to dry, that's better if you've got enough time. You can use it straight like this and it'll dry fairly well. But it adds a kind of a nice texture to a wreath. If you can get some artemisias that are the silvery kinds, like Silver Mound or some of those other flat-leafed versions, those also dry and look really nice in a wreath. Okay, so I've got a wagon full of greens and some other goodies, and I'm going to head back to the shop right now and start working on my wreath. Okay, so we're going to start on our wreath making project in a little bit. First, let me welcome you to my Christmas tree shop. My husband and I own a Christmas tree farm, and so I'm used to doing this. I've been doing it for 30 years, and you'll see all of the tools of my trade behind us. But let's talk a little bit first about what makes a good evergreen to use in a wreath. And I've got a lot of samples to show you because I have access to it. You might not necessarily have that kind of access, but if you can mix your greens, that makes for a way prettier wreath. So let's start. What we cut outside at that big evergreen tree was a blue spruce. So this is blue spruce. Makes a good wreath, and I like that little bit of a blue coloration to it. Some of them will be a little bit more green, and especially if your tree's been growing in the shade, but you will like to have that little bit of a color tones in your wreath. Something that looks similar but is not, this is a concolor fir. A little coarser textured, but still you get that little bit of a blue cast to it, and that's kind of a nice filler. Even some of these branches that don't look like you think are pretty enough will make a good filler and bulk up your wreath. I've got white pine. This is very soft, very easy to work with, makes a really good Christmas wreath. It's nice and flexible. You can get long pieces, and we like those quite a bit. Word about the blue spruces, they do bite, so they're kind of sharp on you. I've got Scotch pine here. Actually, Scots pine is what it's formally called, but I've been saying Scotch pine for so many years, and everybody else does too. But you'll see they're medium length, kind of like the white pine, but a little bit sturdier and bulkier. Makes a good Christmas tree, makes a good wreath. Good needle retention on that. I have here a Fraser fir, which is almost the industry standard on Christmas trees these days. They make really nice, they've got excellent needle retention. An interesting color, the back side of it is more whitish, and then the front side is green, and it makes a real flat piece. This is good for door swags and centerpieces because it doesn't have wingy-dingy leaves or branches that curl in strange directions. So you've got a nice flat piece out of these. Okay. Arborvitae makes an awesome Christmas wreath, and also for centerpieces, excellent for door swags. Again, it's real flat, soft, easy to work with. Different color on the back side, so you can always tell which side is your front and your back. But nice to work with. They'll turn a little bit brown towards the end of the season. So sometimes if you leave that wreath up well past the holidays, you might see it turn a little bit brown, especially if it's really, really cold where you're at. Now we cut some boxwood. Evergreens, broadleaf evergreens like this, hollies are another thing that work really well. Those are good. They do turn a little bit brown also as they dry out. So with those kind of broadleaf evergreens, you might want to use like a anti-transparent like wilt proof or wilt stop to keep them from losing moisture throughout the season. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later too. But hollies, when you use hollies, you watch out for, if you're in a zone where it gets really, really cold and hollies are not hardy there, especially like the variegated hollies, they will actually freeze and turn black in a wreath. So if you use it outdoors. So just heads up for you there. And also I've got junipers. Junipers and cedars make a nice, we had the juniper that we picked out of the shrub. Nice texture. Sometimes you'll get these little like little mini cones, kind of a structure that's on there that gives it a little bit of color, a lot of texture. This is a cedar tree out of my windbreak. Cedars are really nice, and junipers as well. You can get little berries on them, and that gives you a little bit of color, a nice blue subtle color that's in your wreath, and you put it in with a blue spruce and you've got something really pretty. So those are some of my favorites. Beware of like white spruce and some of the shorter needled spruces, Norway spruce. Those don't retain their needles very well, and you'll have a naked wreath by the time the season is over. Balsam fir is another industry standard A lot of commercial wreaths are made out of balsam fir. I don't personally like it that much because it's really flat, doesn't have a lot of texture, and tends to shed its needles like crazy. It won't lose them all, but it'll just constantly shed needles. So I prefer, when we're doing wreaths, the white pine, this blue spruce, and the Fraser fir work really well. If you're in the Pacific Northwest and where you can grow noble firs, those are fantastic. They practically never drop any needles, so that's a good one to use if you can get a hold of those. So we've looked at a few of our evergreens. Let's get started making a wreath. Okay, so we're ready to go. You're going to need a few tools to make a wreath. One is a wreath frame. You can use a wire frame like this. It's got a little bit of a curve to it. That's kind of nice to work with. Pretty heavy and sturdy. They come in a variety of sizes. You can get them at a craft store, pretty much anywhere. You can also find some that are like zigzaggy all the way around with a single wire. Those work pretty well too. But I kind of like this form a little bit better. You're going to need some paddle wire or wire of some sort. This is paddle wire. It's a 22 gauge. Keep in mind that the higher the number, the thinner the wire. So a 22 gauge is going to be a little thinner than a 20 gauge. So I like 20s and 22s. This works a little better. It's a little bit more flexible, that 22 gauge. I use 20 gauge wire for bows and other things that need to be a little bit sturdier. You'll need a good pruners and a wire cutters, because you should never, ever, ever cut wire with your good pruners. You'll ruin them. So okay, let's go. Let's start with a little bit of wire. You're going to wrap your wire right around your frame and give it a couple little loops, and then aim that wire in towards the middle of the wreath, and because you don't want those little ends sticking out anywhere, so you're going to stick it right there like that. Okay, and I'm going to slide this bit of wire down to where one of these cross pieces goes, so that won't move anywhere. Okay, so I got my wire started, and now I'm going to start to make a bunch. So you basically just come along and cut a few pieces of a little bit of everything. Now I've got a lot of little pieces. You don't have to have a lot of little different kinds, but it's always more fun to have more kinds. So as you go along, you're going to layer in. So you'll put short pieces in the front, longer pieces in the back. And you just sort of, it's like you're making a little flower arrangement. And the flat pieces like the cedars work really well in the back. Kind of a framing effect, gives you a little bit of bulk. Let's go with a little bit of this boxwood. Oh, that's too big of a piece, so we'll just cut that back down. And you can kind of lay it in like that. Put some of these little prettier blue spruce pieces in there. Put another piece in. And just kind of arrange them a little bit so that they're all mixed up a little. And so that you can see the little tips. They don't have to be good pieces. You can use cruddy pieces in the back, and that gives you bulk, but doesn't give you, you'll get that little bit of green, but you won't necessarily see those little pretty tips, and save the pretty tips for the parts that show. So you've got a bunch going here. This isn't a huge wreath ring, so I don't want to make my bunches too big, but if you do, that's okay. You can go back through and trim them off a little bit later. I tend to cut my ends fairly even, but it's okay to have them a little bit staggered, and I'll show you why here in a minute. First thing you're going to do is, you can wire this direct onto the frame, but I like to give it a little bit of a loop right around that bunch, and then tighten that up, pull this tight, and that will tighten that bunch, that end, and it holds it a little bit better. And then you start wrapping around the frame. and go fairly tight. You don't want to go so tight that you bend the frame and warp it or anything, but you're going to go pretty tight all the way around. Okay, once you get 3, 4, 5 tightened up there all the way to the end, then you're going to slide that paddle wire right through here. You don't have to do that, but I like to give that loop around that one inside ring, and that'll hold it still. And then I can set my wire down, and I don't have to worry about this coming loose and pieces falling out. So I'm going to do that first, and then I'm going to start on another bunch. And see, that way you can do all your bunches early. You can get them all laid out and put them all out in a row. But I kind of like to work as I go along, and then I can decide what I need more of or less of, or maybe I want to put this piece next to that piece, or so as we're going along. And see, even this isn't the tip of the piece of cedar, but it's useful that way because you can lay it in, and then you can kind of scrunch that bunch up and it doesn't necessarily fling clear out. Vary your bunches a little bit, put a little bit of different things in here and there. And I might look a little piece of cedar in there now. Why, Jane, are you going to come and help me? I'm going to have to throw you out. Okay, so here we got another bunch ready to go. And you can help. And we're just going to lay it in. Now you want to kind of aim it out a little bit, out away from the center. And let's take this around the bunch itself. And we're going to pull it tight and then start winding around the whole frame. Okay, I've got that wound up, and so I'm going to tuck this back through the frame, tighten that off so I can set things down. Now, our goal is to kind of aim the ends towards the out and not towards the inside, because if you scrunch it up too much in the middle, you won't have a center anymore. Get out. Okay, so here we go. We're not doing too bad. We've got a couple bunches on there. And I will continue to go with another bunch. Now I'll tell you about my gloves. When you're working with evergreen, it is very sticky. It is sharp. Some pieces are worse than others. And so I like to wear gloves, but I need to be able to feel what I'm doing. So I like to have the fingertips cut out of them. I tend to use a pair of gloves like isotoners actually work really well. They're snug. That knit or fabric will kind of bounces the needles off, and so you don't get poked as badly as you would with some other, like a cloth glove, or cotton cloth glove. So I like to use these. They're a little pricey, so I wait till the end of the season to buy them. Or you get the knockoff brands, and they're good. So if they have the leather grips, that's actually even better. But you can see that they come apart. They'll fray in the end after I cut them off, and sometimes the seams come loose. But they're good to protect your hands for a little while. And if you're not making a ton of wreaths at any given point in time, then they'll last you a long time, several seasons. Let's see, let's put another bit of Scotch pine in here. And I pick and choose. I don't always like certain pieces, and I'll put them in the back maybe, so I don't have to look at them. So there's no set distance between how far you put your bunches. Just kind of go in wherever it looks natural and right. Gonna loop that. And as I said, you don't have to tighten up that little bunch with that extra move, but I do. I like that it holds it still. Okay. All right, got my third bunch in there. So I'm going to slide that through again. Okay. And you can use cut wire if you want, cut florist wire, shorter pieces, and do each bunch individually if you like. I prefer just to use a paddle wire if I'm doing a wreath like this, because then I can just continually apply bunches and I don't have to start and stop that way. Okay. Now back to our topic of hands, and some of my wreath decorators, they'll put either lotion or petroleum jelly like Vaseline on their fingertips before they work. And what that does is it makes it a little bit easier to get the sap off later. There are some other products you can use. There's a product called Goop, not Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop, but actually you can find it at hardware stores or big box stores, places where mechanics find stuff to clean their hands, and it's good on grease, works great on tree sap as well. So okay, we're gonna wrap this guy around. And as you go along, kind of position each bunch so it lays into the next one and you don't notice a seam or a gap right there. Now, here at our tree farm, we make wreaths with we order some in and then we make them with a clamp ring. And so it's just a single wire and it has little clamp pieces on it, and we lay in bunches and press on a foot pedal and it clamps it in, because that's a lot speedier way to go. You can't, would not be anything you can find for home use, but it's really handy, and it secures the bunches really, really well. Now you'll notice I was using some pieces that are kind of odd, like this. Maybe they're not the prettiest pieces. Oh, they don't cut very well. But you can use a piece like that in the back, and you will just simply grip some of those branches that are flinging out to the side with your wire as you go along. Now, if you wanted to work some dried materials like artemisia in, you can do that at any point in time as well. Just tuck little bits and pieces in your bunches as you go along, and that makes a nice, pretty texture. Ooh, we got our juniper bit with the berries in it there. So I think that's good. I'm going to trim off that little end. You can leave those ends kind of long, but sometimes they'll stick out too far behind the bunches. So I like to leave an inch or two and between where I consider the center of the bunch. Okay, position it. We're going to wrap. All right, I'm too close to that little corner. I guess I can still do it. Yep, there we go. Okay, so as you're going along, just kind of look and make sure you have an even spacing, a number of different things here and there, different kinds of greens. Okay, so I've worked my way all the way around this wreath, and all the bunches need to go in the same direction, so keep that in mind. You don't want to go 2 different directions or you get funny little gaps. So keep working around, and then that last bunch, when you have just about, just a teeny weeny bit of space left, now you've got to put in the last bunch, and that's the trickiest one of all. And here's why, because there's no room. So what you need to do is pull back on that first bunch, but not enough that you would loosen it up or anything like that. And then I'm going to do my little loopy around the bunch there first. Okay, and then I'm going to try and wiggle that in as close and good as I can. So, and you might have to kind of rearrange it a little bit. Don't worry if there's a little bit of a gap as you're working. That's natural, and you can expect that. And you can do some wiggling and rearranging later. But just get that last one under there, and then bend these back forward. And, okay, we've got that all wrapped. We're going to flip it over now. And so now what you have is, you can see how you've worked that out. And I'm going to take my wire cutters, cut that end of the wire, and then I'm going to wrap this several times around that wreath frame again. And that way it won't come loose. Now if you want to reuse this frame again next year, all you need to do is come along with your wire cutters, snip that all off. Make sure you pull your wire out of the greenery if you want to compost or send this away with the yard waste removal. You don't want the wire in there, but you can pull the evergreen right out of that and use your frame again next year. I like those bowed frames because it gives you a little bit of a wreath shape. If you have a bigger frame, you might want to put bundles on the outside edges and the inside, so you would have a multiple layer situation going on, but that's to make a really big fat wreath. But in the meantime, well, here's what we have. So now if there's anything doing something weird like flinging out, I can go back around and snip that off. I might hold it up, take a look at it, and I don't know, I did pretty good. I kept all my bunches fairly even. So now in that spot where you put your last bunch in, you might have a little gap, and sometimes that happens. Now you can work some of these greens around, bend them forward, twist them a little bit. Don't pull too hard. You don't want to pull them out of the bunching you have. But that's okay if you have a little gap even. You can put the bow there, some decorations, a number of ways you can disguise that little gap if you end up with one. But so now we've got a wreath, and I'm going to show you how to make a door swag, and then we're going to talk about how to decorate them. So we learned how to make a wreath. Maybe that looks a little intimidating for you for first time out, but you could make a door swag, which is a piece of cake, really easy. Or maybe you've got like fence posts you want to hang something on, but that isn't quite the thing that needs a whole wreath. So let's do a door swag. So remember how we talked about some evergreen being a little bit more flat than others. Arborvitae is a really great one for door swags. That Fraser fir also works really excellent as well, because they're nice and flat pieces, and they will hang just like you want them to. So if you can do one just with a plain old evergreen bough and a bow, but I like to mix up my greens again. And this is real easy. You just lay it flat. You can, I'm not going to make mine quite that big. I'm going to leave that stem there for a little bit, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Okay, so we can still add a little bit of, let's try a nice little piece of Scotch. Nah, I don't think I like Scotch pine in there. Let's go with some blue spruce to give a little bit of color. And you can just sort of work it in with the other greens. And maybe we'll put another little piece of cedar in the back there to give you some bulk. And very simple. Maybe we'll put a little piece of juniper. Now let's go for some Scotch pine there. Give it a little bit of a different texture. Now I'm going to leave the stems kind of long there, but I've got some greenery going. You're going to take your wire and you're going to wrap it around as tight as you can. So what happens with evergreen, as they dry a little bit throughout the season, and with the wreath the same way, they shrink up just a little bit as they lose moisture. So it is always good to do bunches as tight as you can. And you're just going to wire that around a few times. I'm going to flip over. I'm going to wrap these wires around themselves. And I'm going to cut it off. And I'm going to do what I call a crank. And I go like this, like you're turning a crank. And that actually tightens up your twisted wire. Twist it a few times first, then give it a couple of these little cranks, and that anchors it up, tightens it up really well. Then take those ends back and tuck them back into the greenery so that you don't scratch your door with it. I'm going to show you how to make a door hanger for this particular. You've got your swags all ready to go. And you can put a bow there. You can do it as is, and you can trim that end off and put a bow on it so that you don't see those little ends, or you can add a little top knot to it. And that's easy to do too. Just take a few pieces of greens. And this is going to be a smaller little end. I'm going to cut off some of this. I don't want all of that right there. A little piece of that loose spruce. You want to use kind of the same evergreen that you used previously, and you're going to lay it out at the top. Now you can do a horizontal swag and make them both sides even, and then just make sure you wire a lot of a good anchor in between. Or you can, this is my vertical swag. I'm going to take some more wire again, and then we'll wire it right to the top of that. I'll flip it over. Jane, you came back to help. A twist. I'm going to crank a little bit, and I'm going to aim that wire back into the evergreen. That. Okay. All right. So we've got a nice door swag. There's a little gap in there, but that's where we'll put a bow or a cluster of clones or any kind of decorations we want to there. So, but first off, we need to make a hanger for it. Now with a wreath, you just hang it right on that frame, no problem at all. But a door swag, you don't really have anything to work with. So we're going to take a piece of 20 gauge florist wire. It's already cut, and we're going to wrap it through that center, flip it over, and we're going to even out the ends. Then we're going to twist real tight around the base, and then we can just kind of loop it together. I kind of twist it around a little bit so those two pieces stay together. Then we're going to bend this end back into the stems so that it won't stick out and scratch your door. And you're going to have like a little loop there, and then push that center together, and then you're going to twist those together. Just like that. It's not a beautiful door hanger, but it'll work. And it'll give you a little loop right there so you can hang on a nail or wherever you need to. Okay. All right. Now I think we can look at how to decorate. Okay, now we can start the fun part. We're going to start decorating, and there's a myriad of things you can do to decorate a wreath. And just remember that hot glue is your friend. You can attach a lot of things with that. And you can go through your garden and find good stuff to make your wreaths with there too. But I'm going to start with a bow, and I'll show you how to make a standard florist bow. Now this is a wired velvet, so that means the edges are wired, so you can kind of scrunch and bend and it'll stay put. Now you can do a plastic backed velvet, but they're really hard to work with, and so if you're making your bow for the first time, go for a little softer fabric like this velvet. It has a front and a back, and that'll be important here in about a minute. Okay, so you want to make a bow. start with your tail end. So you want to leave a little length of a tail. I'm going to put this bow on this, on my door swag. So I want that tail to hang down a little ways. And so what you do is you scrunch and twist. So first things first, you scrunch. So you've got a little, your tail's sticking out that way. And then you're going to twist, okay, so that the back side is showing up. Now you're going to fold this into a loop over the top of your thumb. Now see how I've got that going over my thumb, and then I'm going to scrunch again, and I'm going to put that right behind my thumb and between my thumb and forefinger. So now I have twisted, I've made it a center loop for that bow. Now I'm going to twist again. Okay, now I'm twisted back and my top side is showing. I'll make a loop like this, and then I'm going to scrunch again and twist. And you can make these loops any size you want. You can make that center loop any size you want, but the smaller the better, the tighter, it makes a better button in the middle. And then, so you're going to loop it around and scrunch and twist. It's harder to do when there's no front and back side of your ribbon because you forget where you're at and which side you've twisted. And some people just layer them back and forth, but I like the twist method. It gives your bow a little bit more dimension and fluffs it up and scrunches that center up nice and even. So I stick my finger in, measure, and I've got the same size loops, and I'm going to scrunch again and twist. So again, front to back, scrunch and twist. So most of the time I'm working with the top side facing me instead of the bottom side. And then scrunch and twist. Okay. All right. I'm going to make this a 3-loop bow. So I'm going to scrunch, twist, and then I'm going to aim it downwards. So down past my wrist there. And I'm going to tug it a little bit. And at this point, I'll cut off straight. And then I'm going to use some of that 20 gauge florist cut wire because it's a little bit stronger. I like a stronger wire, a thicker wire with the bow because it holds better and is less likely to break and have your ribbon come apart. So then you're going to take that wire, slide it right between, under the loop, that button loop that you made, and between your fingers, and then bend it around the back side, pull both ends tight, and then you're going to kind of bend like that. And you've got to see how it's going around your twisted centers there. And then you're going to twist. And remember when I showed you that crank before? We're going to crank again. And that tightens that bow up really well, or that wire up really well. And it'll tighten that knot so it's nice and scrunchy right in there. Okay? And then you can kind of fluff that bow. And then pull your ends down. Sometimes they want to do something wonky, and sometimes that first tail wants to twist a little funny. But there you go. Now, you can do a couple of treatments to the ends if you like. You can either cut an angle and make it straight across. I like to lay both my ends together, fold that in half, and then make an angled cut with the high side on the inside of the ribbon to the side of the ribbon, like that. And then you have like a little forked end to your tails, and it's kind of fun that way. Now we're going to put this right on that door swag. So with your bow, you're going to have, it's a little bit twisted. You can take your both sides and go right around that center of that wreath. Watch out for your hanger there. And again, twisty, 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 till that's nice and tight. And then you can either cut the ends off or just make sure they all get tucked way down into the greens so you don't see them there. And you can reuse those bows. You know, if you don't cut your ends off too tight or too small, you can reuse these bows. Just take them off. Even if you had to cut that wire, you could always put a new wire around that center loop. So, all right, I'm going to fluff a little bit. And now you may have to tuck those ends a little bit around the greens. And there you go, you've got a door swag. Now you can put some cones in there. The long, narrow cones kind of dangle down kind of pretty. Put a few in the top. Put some of your dried flowers in there. Maybe a little pod would be kind of fun in there. So, but your door swag's all ready to go. Now let's talk about how to do a wreath. Okay, so we've got the hard part done. Now we can do the fun part. And you see I've decorated this wreath with all the stuff that I pulled out of my garden. Purple millet's a great thing. It dries really well and looks good. We've got some of our sedum in here. There's my clematis blooms, a few little pine cones. And that's what I've done with that. So I'm going to show you how to actually anchor those on. And I'm going to use a different wreath for that because there's some other techniques we can show you. So I've started this wreath and I've got a couple of things already started in here. I'm going to put a regular bow on that this time. So the bow that we had for the, or a similar bow to the door swag, we're going to attach, and so we're going to take our wire ends and go one on either side of that wreath ring. And so you're going to go all the way around. If it's really thick, if your greens are really thick in there and it's hard to see, you can kind of weave through. You don't have to go clear around the ring. So you're just going to wire that right on. And again, with your wires, poke them right back up into the wreath so they don't leave shot and scratch. You can lay it down, that wreath down if you need to, because that wired ribbon will fluff up pretty easily. So the trickiest part often is to get your bow centered with the rest of your decorations, but and sometimes I get a little off on that. But some of my employees like to use, like, say, a bucket or something, and they'll prop that wreath up like this, so that they can see, look down at what they're doing. I tend to lay mine flat. I think it's easier to work with that way, and plus I'm pretty tall, so I can look down fairly well and see what I'm doing. Now your bow, if you didn't get it quite centered, you can kind of wiggle that wire around a little bit and get it to go. And then we can start putting some fun stuff on it. Cones are great. You can find cones all over the place. You can pick them up out of your yard. You can buy bags full of them. This is a Austrian pine. They get a little thorny. They're kind of tough. And then this is a spruce. Oh darn! I've drawn blank on what that is. And it's a spruce of sorts, but they're kind of long. These are white pines. I pick those up out in my yard. I buy these, but these get kind of soft and a little spongy sometimes. But these are nice solid cones. But if you want to attach a cone, you can do a number of things. Now, remember when I told you hot glue was our friend? You can either just blob that in glue and stick it right on. But I tend to not like to use glue on cones this size, because I might want to cut those off and have them be good for next year. So I'll take a number 22 wire and wiggle that in between the cone pieces there, give it a little twist like that. So you've got two wired ends, and that's anchored in there. And then you can just work your way and go clear around the back, the frame. And I do this without even looking at it, but I feel. But then again, make sure that we have bent our wires back up into the frame. So I'm going to put a couple of cones on there. I tend to like to use clusters. So I might do a cluster. I've done a cluster of cones here at the bottom with a couple little artificial poinsettias. And then I'll use a single cone over here with some berries or something next to it. Those are real easy to use. Okay. And then, like the artificial poinsettias, flowers, greenery, little bits of holly, artificial holly work really good. You just cut off the ends, and I'm going to hot glue again. So I just dip that end in. This is a glue pot. So it's like a little, you can actually use an electric skillet, and you can either use glue sticks that are cut up into little pieces and melted in there. Or you can sometimes find these little chips that you can melt in there. And as you go along, you're going to use quite a bit of it. And it's very hot. Watch out. You can also use a glue gun. But I find glue guns a little unwieldy. I tend to like to do the dipping, and you get a little bit more glue, anchors things on a lot better than for that. And outside, hot glue works fine. It does get a little brittle after a while. So with bigger things like those big cones, I'd like to actually anchor them in with wire like that. I've got a little bird. He's got a clip, so he's kind of handy. I could either dip his little bottom in hot glue and just stick him in there, but since he's got a clip, I'm going to clip him in and make him look kind of cute. I've got some berries here. Make sure artificial berries and pieces like this you can use. Just dip the ends in and hot glue them on. Watch out, make sure that those that you get from the craft show or craft stores are waterproof, or just don't hang it out where the elements are going to get up. Sometimes that paint will dissolve and kind of run off if it gets wet or full of snow and that kind of thing. So again, like I said, I like to use clusters. So I'll twist a couple of wires together. I might tuck a few, and with a short little thing like this, I will wrap it right around a branch. So I'll wrap that little wire right around a branch, and then you've got a little cluster of color right there. You can hot glue this in too if you wanted to. I bend that over, make a little blob, and then I've got something to glue to. So that's a couple of different methods of attaching berries. If you wanted to put some bell on, that's kind of fun. It'll dingle a little bit, especially if you can dangle it from a little piece of ribbon or string. But I'll spear that through the bottom there. See if that'll go. Oh, there we go. And you can wire that in someplace and make it kind of fun. Go to the dollar store and find all kinds of Christmas decorations and get them on sale really cheap after the season, and you'll get like snowflakes. You can just hot glue the tips on there, just like that, and add a couple of fun little glittery snowflakes. Same way with little ornaments like a little star. And I just got these at the dollar store, or they're plastic, so you can use glass. Glass will work just fine. You've got those old glass balls that you don't know what to do with, and you don't hang them on your tree anymore. Bring those out and dip them in glue and set them down in here and there. I'm going to just put a little bit of glue there, a little star, maybe we'll go in with a little star. Oops, I dipped the wrong tip. Oh well, we're not going to see it. And just kind of sink them in. Now, the glue pots and the glue guns, you're going to get a lot of little stringy bits of glue, so just kind of looks like cobwebs. Just pick those off a little bit later, and then you can kind of tip it back, take a look, see if you like how it turned out. If you want to add some more stuff, you can. Pick out those little glue stems, and voila, there you go. Oops, let that hang down. Now you can put the bow anywhere you want. On my little natural one, I did the bow to the side, and I made that out of raffia. So, and you don't have to go the whole bow making process for that. You can just basically make a couple little loops just like that, twist it together, and wire around. And you could just have a little fluff, and you can poof them around. You can put a little pod in the center or a piece of sedum to make it look kind of fun, pine cone. If If you use pods, pods work really great too, and you get those at the craft store. You can, if you get them on the stakes, that works really good. If they don't come on a stake, they're easy to wire in. Either hot glue, dip them in hot glue and stick them right in there, or you can, they're kind of spongy, so you can run a wire right through like that, twist it down, and now you've got something to anchor it on with and twist it around a branch. You don't have to go clear through the wreath for some of these things. You can, if you're wiring on a pine cone, you can just wire through a couple branches and they'll stay on really well. So, but there you go. The possibilities are endless, and I hope I've showed you how to make a pretty wreath, a fun wreath that you made yourself, and maybe out of stuff out of your own garden. So, hope you've been inspired, and happy holidays.